So it is my pleasure to once again welcome our frequent guest speaker, Janice Campbell. And we always enjoy and learn so much from her message. And today, I think especially you're going to really appreciate and learn from her talk. So let's give a warm welcome to Janice.
Hi. Sorry, the mic has to go back in the pocket. Okay. Welcome. So today we're going to talk about being at peace with yourself. First, I want to start with, why does peace matter? Why does peace matter? And I love this poem from Lazu. If there is to be peace in the world, there must be peace in the nations. If there is to be peace in the nations, there must be peace in the cities. If there is to be peace in the cities, there must be peace between neighbors. If there is to be peace between neighbors, there must be peace in the home. If there is to be peace in the home, there must be peace in the heart. I love that. So that's why we're focusing on why peace matters. Because who you're being, what you're doing, what's going on in your consciousness, it does matter. We can't wait for the world to line up perfectly before we have peace. Although sometimes we'd like that to happen. If only this would change, and this would change, and this would change, then I would feel at peace. But it doesn't work that way. That's backwards. So how do we get to that place of being at peace with ourselves? I believe our deepest desire is to be who we are, and that our greatest fear is that we can't be. I'm going to share my journey just briefly. Kind of goes into the topic we'll be talking about today. But I've always had a close relationship with God. When I was a kid, I loved going to bed because I got to go be with God. There's a street light outside the window, and I just remember that every night. It's like, yay! It just always had this peaceful, wonderful connection to God. And then growing up, I always felt so weird. Like none of my friends cared about God, talked about God. It was like a secret. But I never felt separate from God. I'm reading a book right now by this woman, Marsh. I don't know. But the name of the book is Searching for God. And it's a really good book because it talks about how in the Old Testament, Job was searching for questioning, where are you, God? What's going on, God? Why is this happening, God? And I thought, that hasn't been my search. My search has always been the opposite. My search has been, how can I live on the physical plane? That to me was the challenge. I didn't feel like I fit in, and it just was confusing. Like, what, you have to get these jobs that you don't even like, and do things you don't want to do, and say yes when you want to say no. And that part just seemed really, really confusing. And I realized that there's kind of a belief embedded in us that we have to compromise who we are to survive. We have to compromise to fit in. We have to try to be more than who we are, or we try to be less than who we are. But it's like this thing, where do I fit in here? And I started my career as a CPA, and because I love freedom. So I thought, okay, well, I can make a lot of money, and then I will have freedom. I could live wherever I want to live. But that soon became a bondage because I hated being a CPA. And around that time, it was back in 1987 when I first came to Unity, and I loved Unity. I'm like, oh my God, they're saying everything that I've always felt in my heart. Like, this is so cool. I just loved it. And I felt like I should be reading the Journal of Taxation. I'd be in the closet reading devouring all these spiritual books. But again, how is this going to work? How do you make money being a spiritual person? Life is not designed to work. And then my husband and I, for years, we did this business, not well, like 3 years, but this business class. It was funny because we lived in Marin and the class was in Sonoma, and we fought all the way up and all the way back. Why aren't you doing this? And why aren't you doing this? But it was all about fake it till you make it. This is how you become successful. And it was just so painful. It's like, ah. And then at Unity, I was teaching lots of classes, and it was great. However, for me, it was still kind of vague. I was still stuck. I was still like, okay, I'm hearing all these wonderful things, faith, love, surrender, but I'm still stuck. I don't know how to be in the physical plane and make money and still be a spiritual person. And so I remember teaching spiritual economics. I taught that class so many times because, the combination, I think, the practical and the spiritual. I loved it. But I have a diagram, which we'll be talking about in a little bit. But that was the moment that I created this diagram that I've been using now for 30 years. And it was like, visually, how do you describe the flow? Like Eric Butterworth talks about, there's a flow. We're part of this flow. All of us are part of this flow. And then the flow of mind, idea, expression. How do we go from God to the physical plane? How do we reconcile that relationship? And I remember we're living in Larkspur, exactly where I was standing. I'm like, God, I promise if I ever get unstuck, I promise I will share this with other people. Because that feeling when you're just like, I don't know how to get out of this. So I started creating this system 30 years ago, and I know because I was pregnant with my oldest son, and it's called the Receive Your Life System. And I pretty much have been doing this nonstop for 30 years. Tons of yellow pads, my husband and I doing all these exercises, trying to figure it all out, and because I knew life was designed to work, and my CPA brain was going to figure out, how do we reconcile this inner conflict that was going on within me? And I'm sure we're all connected. If it's going on within me, it's going on within other people too. So I knew the spiritual principles work, and therefore life, which is the expression of spirit, it has to work. Like I said, I trusted God, but I didn't really trust the physical plane so much. But then it's like life can't be all about struggling, suffering, despair, depression. That just makes no sense in God's world. I couldn't reconcile it, but I just knew that there had to be a way through. And then, so lately I've been thinking a lot about overabundance. It's like a lot of times we talk about scarcity, but we kind of have overabundance. There's like so many options and so many choices and so many things we could be reading and studying and looking at and engaged in and doing, and it's kind of too much. And so I've been simplifying my life, and even with Receive Your Life, like I said, I've been doing it for a really long time, but I kind of spun out where I was like adding to it. Maybe there's more. Maybe I'm missing something. Learning all these different spiritual practices, learning about so many different things. I used to tell this with clients, like a lot of times we're ready right here, but then we keep going. Not there yet, not there yet. Need more information, need more, it's like we're getting there. Soon we'll figure it out, but it's never right where we are. But then I decided, I'm here now. Receive Your Life is complete. So, and then we get like the personal self, the doubt self, It's like, well, who am I to talk about this? And who am I why do I think I have something that people could use? There's so much out there already. There's so many, it's just repeating the same stuff. But, it's not true. This is what we're going to talk about today, how we're each given desires. And those desires are very specific and individual for each one of us. So now I'm back to my original vision, which was to create a simple system that everyone can use, that's accessible to everyone. Thinking of your prayer, Meg. God is available and accessible to everyone. It's the greatest equalizer in the world because no one is left out. We all have direct connection to God. And I used to have this vision of, with Receive Your Life, that it would be like a Tupperware party. You know, it's like you receive your life, and then you share it with other people, and then they share it with other people, and soon everybody is living from God consciousness, living the life that they have been given to live, kind of in a ripple effect. So, what is receive your life? Receive your life is a way of living that's guided by spirit rather than the world. You get your guidance and your inspiration from God rather than looking out into the world to who you should be, what you should want, what you should do. It's also living the life that God designed you to live, moment by moment, without compromising yourself, without believing that you should be different than how God made you. And it's also having a personal, intimate relationship with the source of your being, connecting to God very intimately, you with your source. It's remembering the beauty and truth of what you are and sharing that gift with others. Receiving our life seems so obvious. Like, why wouldn't we live the life we've been given to live? Like, you know, you think about it, a rose bush blooms roses. The rose bush is not sitting there, God, I probably should figure out how to make some oranges or maybe some daisies. But we have free will, so we're all over the place. You know, we do the judging and comparing. Well, who's right and who's wrong? Maybe I should be more like them. Look at how outgoing they are. Look at how ambitious they are. Look at how creative they are. And then we think we can morph into something else. But nature's not designed that way, and I don't think God made us that way. We're each an individualized expression of spirit. Not better, not worse than any other. So why wouldn't we receive our life? I think these are a few reasons. One is that we've been conditioned to live backwards. You know, it's once I, then I. Once I get my act together, once I figure it out, once I do everything I'm supposed to do, then I deserve to be who I am. Like, it's backwards. You know, it's like we have to do all this stuff, and then we finally could be who we are. It's like we have to earn the right or deserve the right to be who we are. Another reason is the physical journey is often valued over the spiritual journey. You know, it's always, we have a way of always, oh, really? That's wonderful. Look at this this is, I don't know, this is from a long time ago, but this thought, I don't know if it's appropriate, but it always stuck with me. Was there was this couple in high school. They got married young. They were like the popular people, and then I heard the guy was having an affair, and my mom's like, "Oh, they bought a house." I'm like, "Yeah, Mom, but he's having an affair. But they bought a house. But they bought a house." And that always just stayed with me. Like, we measure so many often, like, what's going on the physical plane? What do you have to show for yourself? Instead of what's going on in your heart and soul, and are you at peace with yourself, living a life in integrity with your values? So I think it's really interesting how we value the visible more than the invisible, and yet everything gets created from the invisible. Another thing we do is we look to the world as our source. We think the economy is our source, the politicians are our source, our spouse is our source, our boss is our source, our clients are our source, you know, all the powers out there. Who do I need to be to get my good stuff from out there? It's backwards. Another thing we do is we judge and compare ourselves with others. You know, remember, whenever we're diminishing ourselves or we're diminishing another person, it's not based on the truth of who they are. It's not based on the truth of who we are. It's impossible. There is no diminishment in truth. Another thing why we, I think, don't receive our life is we want to fit in. It's the fear of survival or abandonment. Oh, if people knew what I really care about or who I really am, they wouldn't want to be my friend, or they'd go away, or I'd be so embarrassed. I mean, that's how I used to be. Like, my spirituality was a source of shame for me. You know, it's really interesting, too, is you can always find your gift, how God made you, the gift that you are, by looking at your shame, because we've been conditioned to hide that part of ourselves. You know, it's like we'll show the worldly part, but the sacred, secretive part, our soul, A lot of times that's what we're ashamed of. Like we're ashamed of the gift that God gave us. It's definitely backwards. Okay. And another thing we do is we worship two masters. And I think this happens maybe more so if you're on a spiritual plane, because you want to worship God, but then you're worshiping the world because you're living in the world, where if a person didn't feel a strong spiritual connection, I just follow the rules, I do it, this is all you got to do, you do boom, 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 and you're set. Like, what are you worried about? Why are you overthinking this? It's almost like, but when you've got a strong spiritual desire going on, sometimes that conflicts. And yet we're all on a spiritual path. So I don't care who a person, everyone has a soul, and everyone experiences inner conflicts. I think there's different degrees of divine discontent, but a lot of times when we're feeling divine discontent, we're like, well, what's wrong with me? I should be happy. Look at them. Look what they're doing. That should be enough for me. And then your soul's like, well, wait a minute. Something else going on here. And now we experience, so that inner conflict is what robs us of being at peace with ourselves. We talk about how do we be at peace with ourselves? Because we've got that inner conflict going on when we're living from an either or. And that either or is either I can compromise myself and have what I want, or I could be my true self, but then I have to give up something else I value. This happens a lot of times with relationships. Well, I could be who I really am. Well, I could compromise. I could be who they want me to be, and then I get to be, or I could be connected. Because if I really am my true self, well, I don't know if people really want to be with that, or if that's going to work in this world. So you can kind of see where we've got that inner conflict going on, which is really the intersection of the physical and the spiritual. But the good news is we're designed for the and. We're designed for the and. You wouldn't have those desires in the first place to be, let's say, to be your true self and to be connected in a relationship. Like, we're designed for that and. So a lot of times we get split with the either or, but we're really designed for the and, because we are that wholeness. And the thing that happens too when we compromise ourselves, it's not sustainable. It always has to be unwound. Like, you'll notice anytime you kind of lie to yourself, or you say this is okay when it's not really, you notice it has to be unwound, because we have to get back to God. We have to get back to truth. One thing I love is Emily Cady, when she says, desire is God knocking at the door of your consciousness with its infinite supply. And she also says, God speaks to us through our desires. So it's like those true desires are a match for us. We can't ignore those desires, because our desires are the expression of our spiritual essence. It's how we bring heaven to earth. So if we're ignoring or downplaying our true desires, we're really saying no to God and yes to the world. And the way to recognize that is we have to just get it in the right order. It's not giving up one. Oh, I guess I just have to give up everything on the physical plane if I'm going to be a spiritual being. No, what we have to do is get it in the right order. We receive from God first, and then we take that and mold that substance, those ideas, and then we express that out into the world. So all it is just getting things in the right order, where it's God first, honesty, truth first, and then giving that out, rather than thinking, I have to figure out the physical plane. It doesn't work. It's backwards. So God wants to live and express through you and as you. That's why we have these seeds of desire planted within us. The acorn has the built-in desire to be an oak tree. Like, why do we accept that in nature and we don't accept that in ourselves? You have the built-in desire to be what you are. Remember, I believe our greatest desire is to be who we are. So we love that, and it's painful when we don't do that. So now we're going to look at our diagram. So hopefully this diagram, got this thing, will help us understand this concept more clearly. So here we have the pull. So I'm just going to talk about that for a second. The pull is really, I believe, the language of spirit. It's God talking to us. So when God's communicating to us, like Emily Kading saying, God speaks to us through our desires. When you feel a pull, you're being called forth. It's Source communicating to you. How else would Source be communicating to us other than that pull forth of what we love? So the pull, God, and then there's the desires of God. Those are the desires God implanted within us. They are the expression of what we are. So when we line up our thoughts, words, and actions with truth, with God, we feel at peace with ourselves. We feel satisfied. It's like a soul-satisfying success. Our soul is satisfied. And over here, when we experience a push, that's when we're turning away from Source. Like the prodigal son. I'm going to go out and figure this thing all by myself. You know, I'm going to turn away from truth. I'm going to turn away from what I know to be true. I'm going to listen to the peanut gallery. I'm going to listen to the worldly opinions. I'm going to live from all the conditioning I grew up with, everything I've been taught. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do all the shoulds. And then when our thoughts, words, and actions are aligned up with our compromised self, we experience discontent and dissatisfaction. So it's just you start to notice, where am I living from? Am I living from God consciousness, or am I living from worldly consciousness? And you'll notice that they feel very, very different. And the thing about receiving your life is it's a moment by moment. So I kind of think of it sometimes like you fall off the horse, you get back on the horse. You fall off, but the main thing when you fall off, like, why am I so depressed? Why do I feel so bad? Why is this so hard? Why am I so frustrated? You could say, where did I just go? What did I make up about myself? Did I just diminish myself? Am I, because what's interesting about over here when we're in the pushes, we have a misunderstanding of ourselves in that moment, but we also have a misunderstanding of God. So over here, we may be experiencing scarcity. It's because we've taken the bait of the worldly opinion and we've abandoned the truth. We forgot that we're connected to an infinite supply. And then we start gathering evidence of all that scarcity, and then we're kind of stuck on the horizontal loop, like round and round and round. And what's interesting, too, is about the giving and receiving. When we're here living in this is, you could also call this the Christ consciousness. And what happens, the more you get grounded in the truth of your being and your faith in God deepens, then you kind of close this door more often. Like you're just not so vulnerable to the noise of the world. You don't let it stick to you. It's almost like, what is that? I'm made of rubber, you're made of glue. It bounces off me, but it doesn't, those thoughts, you don't resonate with those diminishing thoughts and grow them because you know the truth of your being. You know what you really are. So here we're receiving from an infinite supply, and then we're growing it, and we end up giving peace and satisfaction because that's the consciousness we're living from. And over here, it's kind of, the world is finite. It's the way that it's set up. And then over here, we get really, people say, what, you want me to give more? I'm already exhausted. I'm already depleted. It's never enough. So they're very different giving and receiving cycles. So I just want to mention, the thing about receiving your life too is it's very experiential. Like we're talking about it, it's kind of like a theory thing, but it actually is lived very experientially. And so we're going to have a class starting September 11th for an hour and a half. And it's actually, receiving your life is really, really fun because what you do through understanding, compassion, and forgiveness, you start to release the misunderstandings of your value. So you feel lighter and lighter because this burden gets lifted. Because you see, this is think of it like a pipeline, a direct pipeline to Source, and this is the kink in the hose. So the more we can loosen that, dislodge it, the more we experience the presence of God. So it makes this makes way more sense when you're working with your specific pieces. What are your push-pulls, which would maybe different? Obviously, what's a pull for you could be a push for someone else, and vice versa. Like, there is no right way to be. And then you look at your specific desires. What is Source giving to me, the life that I'm here to live? And looking at your values and your spiritual essence and your inner conflicts and your misunderstandings. So it's a very, very, very personal process. So the way to resolve your inner conflicts is to get in the habit of living from your soul. You know, to live a spirit-driven life rather than a worldly-driven life. Matthew 16:26, Jesus says, "And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul? Is anything worth more than your soul?" I mean, we have to get this in the right order. Let's see. And, you know, we always hear it's better to give than to receive. But then Jesus says, "Freely ye have received, therefore freely give." I think he thinks we already got this. You know, do you realize the abundance that you are given? Like, we have to receive that. We have to start letting that in. That's the truth. The world is not our boss. And so that's what we're receiving when we receive Christ's truth. You end up giving Christ. So I think the most loving, generous thing a person can do is to receive their life and to give the gift that they are. You know, sometimes it's like, oh, receiving your life, it sounds so selfish. It's all about you, receiving your life. But we're not talking about the personal, ego, worldly. We're talking about receiving God, receiving truth. Because what happens then is what we're giving is love, peace, and joy to the world. When we're living from our compromised self, what we end up giving to the world is resentment, anger, bitterness. How can that ripple out and be helpful to anyone? So receiving your life is a moment-by-moment practice. Your life is received in the moment. It's not a one and done. It's just kind of you get in the habit. Where am I living from? Where are my choices coming from? What is my true source? So past regrets and future fears, they live in the horizontal. Remember, we're timeless, eternal beings. All this, I should have done this, I could have done this, I wasted my life. All of that stuff is in the horizontal and can be healed with spiritual understanding. And once healed, we forgive. We give up those thoughts of diminishment that we've been holding on to about ourselves. Peace, love, joy, and lightness of being live in the vertical. So we want to practice living in the vertical for more and more of our day. And the richest, most satisfying life you could ever desire is awaiting your receptivity. We have to receive the beautiful life that we have been given to live. And everyone has been given a beautiful life that is a match. I always think it's so perfect. Like, you don't want someone else's life. It's built in. We want the life God gave us to live. And not only that, but we're perfectly designed to fulfill on the desires that live in our heart and soul. We're not given desires that belong to someone else. We are the acorn, you know, waiting to grow into the oak tree. Okay. Oh, yeah, I left something, of course. Okay, anyway, that's it for today. And now it's time for our meditation. Yes. So let's just get comfortable, relaxed. Just letting any heaviness or burden or shoulds, misunderstandings that you may have been carrying around, just anything that's not yours to hold on to. Knowing that no mistakes were made when God made you. Perfect, divine child of God. we have to do to access that divine wisdom, divine guidance, is just listen. Just listen to that still, small voice. Just closing the door on the world. Saying, I'm going directly to source. I'm here to listen to my guidance. How God wants to use me. I am open and receptive to God's living spirit of truth. And now let's spend a moment in this silence and just breathe in the fullness of what you are, knowing that nothing is missing, nothing needs to be improved upon. Your isness is whole, complete, and perfect. Your soul is untouchable. Just breathe into the love that you are, the completeness, the wholeness, the fullness. And now when you're ready, gently bring your awareness back into the room. And just notice how much easier it is to see the love that others are when you get the love that you are. So it is.